Conrad Ashby let Wren go on a Wednesday. He was looking at his phone when he said the words. A flat, distracted dismissals, the same tone he used to cancel lunch reservations. She had stood in the center of his glass-walled office on the 43rd floor of Ashby Tower, above the grey sprawl of Toronto in January, and he had not once looked up. 3 days later, staring at a recovered maintenance log that should not have existed, Conrad understood that he had just fired the only person in the building who knew the difference between a faulty pressure valve and a deliberate act of sabotage. The distinction, it turned out, was everything. Wren Alcott was 29 years old and held the title of Senior Facilities Supervisor for Ashby Capital Group, which was a corporate way of saying she kept the bones of a 46-story building alive without anyone noticing. She arrived at 6 in the morning, before the security rotation changed. She left after 10 at night, when the lobby went quiet and the cleaning crews wrapped up their last floor. In between, she managed 17 contractors, 4 mechanical systems, a server cooling infrastructure that cost more than most people's homes, and the invisible architecture of a building that Conrad Ashby's empire depended on without ever thinking about. Conrad rarely thought about Wren. That was, in the precise language of what happened next, the problem. She was slight. Brown hair always pulled back in a functional knot. Steel-toed work boots that moved soundlessly on concrete. She wore the company-issued navy coveralls when she was on the floor, and a plain grey blazer when she was in the boardroom, which was almost never. She did not eat in the staff cafeteria. She ate, Rafe later told Conrad with some bewilderment, from a thermos she brought from home, usually in the mechanical room on sub-level 2, sitting on a toolbox, reading maintenance manuals the way other people read novels. Nobody paid attention to Wren Alcott. That was also, as it turned out, the point. The reason Conrad fired her was the Mercia presentation. Ashby Capital was 3 weeks from closing a $2.4 billion development deal with Groupe Mercia, a Quebec-based infrastructure conglomerate, and the signing meeting was being held on the 38th floor. The Executive Conference Centre, floor-to-ceiling glass, a panoramic view of Lake Ontario, the kind of room Conrad kept specifically to make other men feel small. Halfway through the presentation, at precisely the moment Conrad clicked to the projected revenue slide, every sprinkler head in Conference Suite C dropped open. Not with water, the fire suppression on that floor used a clean agent gas system. But the activation triggered the building-wide alarm, the automated PA announcement, the strobe lighting. The Mercia delegation, 12 executives who had flown in from Montreal, spent 40 minutes standing on Bay Street in January, while the fire department cleared the building. The deal did not collapse, but it cracked, the signing was pushed. The leverage Conrad had carefully constructed over 8 months of negotiation had been undermined in 40 humiliating minutes. He called Wren to his office before the last fire truck had pulled away from the curb. She arrived in her grey blazer, thermos in hand, and stood where he indicated, center of the room, not in the chair, which he did not offer. Conrad stood by the window. He spoke for approximately 4 minutes. He used the words negligence and liability and unacceptable in the sentence, "I cannot afford people who cannot maintain basic operational standards." Wren looked at him the entire time. Her expression was not defensive. It was not apologetic. It was a stillness so complete that Conrad, who had faced down hostile acquisition boards and regulatory tribunals, found it briefly unnerving. He pushed past it. He slid the termination envelope across the desk, 6 weeks severance, signed by HR. He had prepared it before she arrived. She picked up the envelope without opening it. "I understand, Mr. Ashby," she said. Her voice was level. Not cold, not hurt. Factual, the way a weather report is factual. She left. The door clicked shut, and Conrad went back to his window and the city below, and the slowly repairing damage of the afternoon. He did not watch her clear her office because he did not consider what she might be clearing from it. Wren's workspace was a small, windowless room adjacent to the mechanical floor on level 2. She had been there for 2 years and 3 months. When Rafe, head of corporate security, a former OPP investigator with a face like weathered limestone, walked past the room an hour after she left, one multi-tool in a leather case. A laminated emergency protocol card she had printed herself, a photograph of a young man, mid-20s, grinning in a hospital bed with a thumbs up, a drip line taped to his forearm. Rafe stopped in the doorway. "He let you go," he said. Wren zipped the bag. "He did." "Over the 38th floor?" "Yes." Rafe looked at the closed bag, then at the photograph she had placed face down on the table before picking it back up. "Wren, there's something he should know." He made his decision, Rafe. She lifted the bag onto her shoulder. Her voice was not unkind, but it was final. Make sure the east cooling tower pump gets its scheduled maintenance on the 15th. The contractor Ashby uses doesn't tighten the secondary coupling properly. Someone needs to check behind them. Rafe blinked. You're leaving maintenance notes. I'm leaving accurate information. She walked past him into the corridor. Take care of yourself. The freight elevator doors closed between them. By Friday, Conrad had a new facilities supervisor, sourced from an agency. The man wore a hard hat that was clearly brand new and carried a clipboard he consulted for things that should have been memorized. He found Wren's handwritten system maps taped to the inside of the mechanical room cabinet and spent an hour trying to decode them. Conrad noticed none of this. He was managing the fallout from the Mercia situation, restructuring his presentation timeline, and dealing with the slow creep of something he refused to name, a wrongness in the building he moved through every day. The coffee from the new machine on 43 was slightly off. His morning security briefing came 4 minutes later than it used to. His calendar had 2 scheduling conflicts that would never have existed when Wren was handling facility coordination. On Saturday morning, Rafe appeared in his office without a meeting request. Conrad looked up from the document he was reviewing. Rafe's expression was not an expression Conrad had seen on him before. There's something you need to see, Rafe said. He set a tablet on the desk. The service elevator on sublevel 1 has been malfunctioning. I sent our tech team down to run diagnostics on the control board. Conrad waited. They found a secondary drive recorder, a private one separate from the building's security network, motion activated. Wren installed it 14 months ago. Rafe paused. She didn't tell anyone. Conrad looked at the tablet. Play it. The footage was time-stamped Wednesday. The same Wednesday, 47 minutes before the Mercia presentation began. The service corridor on sublevel 2 was a grey tunnel of pipes and junction boxes. On the screen, Wren walked into frame carrying her toolkit. She was heading toward the building's primary electrical distribution room. A routine check, exactly the kind of thing she did 40 times a week. A man stepped out from behind a ventilation stack. He was wearing a visitor's badge and a maintenance vest that was not from Ashby Capital. Wrong shade of navy, wrong logo, a detail that would register as wrong only to someone who had looked at that vest every day for 2 years. He was large, mid-40s, the specific physical build of someone trained for it, not gym-built. He moved to block her path, and when Wren stopped, he reached into the vest. Conrad leaned toward the screen. Beside him, Rafe was very still. The man produced a compact device, a wireless signal jammer, and a bypass module. He held it up and said something without audio. His posture was not threatening in the way criminals in films are threatening. It was professional. He was explaining terms. He wanted access to the distribution room through her, with her key card. Wren set down her toolkit. In the next 11 seconds, she did 4 things. She stepped left, angling to his outside. She drew his attention to her right hand, which she raised slowly as if complying. And while he tracked it, her left hand snapped downward, striking the back of his forearm with the side of her palm, a precise brachial disruption. The bypass module dropped. As he reached for it, she stepped through his lowered center of gravity, hooked her leg behind his knee, and controlled his descent to the floor with a grip on his collar. He landed hard. She dropped a knee across his lower back. From her toolkit, she produced a zip tie, not cable ties used for wiring, but high tensile restraints, a different thing altogether, a thing she had brought with a different purpose in mind. She secured his wrists. She picked up the bypass module and placed it in her toolkit. She used her radio, not the building's channel, a secondary frequency, and spoke 2 sentences. Then she stood, smoothed the front of her coveralls, picked up the toolkit, and walked to the distribution room. She completed her maintenance check. 47 minutes later, she appeared on floor 38 to deliver the updated fire suppression calibration report, which was when the system triggered anyway. From a separate relay, the man's colleagues had already activated remotely before Wren stopped the primary breach. She had stopped the server room from being wiped. She had not stopped the meeting from being disrupted, because there had been a second operative and she had been one person. And then she had walked upstairs and been fired for it. Conrad sat with the tablet in his hands for a very long time. He did not speak. Rafe did not fill the silence. Finally, who was he? We identified him this morning. Corporate intelligence contractor. He's been linked to Meridian Group. They've been circling our server infrastructure for the Mercia deal data for 3 months. They wanted the bid documents. Rafe paused. Wren apparently knew. There are 17 maintenance log entries, flagging unusual network activity near the data center over the past year, all filed through the internal system. all routed to iCompliance. Another pause. iCompliance lost them in a filter update 8 months ago. Nobody read them. Conrad set the tablet down. She flagged it 17 times, he said. Yes. And filed the reports correctly. Yes. And nobody read them. No. The silence in the office was different now. It had weight. There's more, Rafe said. The parking structure beneath Ashby Tower had a camera on level P3 near Conrad's reserved space. The footage from November, 2 months ago, showed a man crouched behind the concrete barrier beside Conrad's vehicle at 2:14 in the morning. He was working at the wheel assembly on the rear passenger side. 11 minutes into the footage, a second figure appeared from the stairwell. She wore a dark coat and carried nothing visible. She moved without sound, which Conrad knew now was not coincidence but discipline. She saw the man before he heard her. What followed was not long. She approached his blind side, used a palm strike to the back of his skull that drove his face into the concrete barrier, controlled enough to stun, hard enough to remove the problem, and caught him as he crumpled. She lowered him quietly to the ground. She checked his pulse with 2 fingers at his neck. She examined the wheel assembly. Retrieved a phone from his jacket pocket. She spent 6 minutes photographing the undercarriage and the tampered component with her own device. Then she opened her coat and removed a small roll of industrial tape and a socket wrench. She fixed what had been broken. She looked up, directly into the camera, for 1 second, not with surprise, but with the flat acknowledgement of someone who had already accounted for the lens. Then she walked back to the stairwell and was gone. Conrad drove that car the next morning at 7:20. He had noticed nothing. She was in that building for 2 years and 3 months, Rafe said quietly. By my count, since we started pulling the logs, she prevented 3 significant data breaches, filed 42 security-adjacent maintenance reports that nobody escalated, and on at least 2 occasions physically intervened in situations that would have been catastrophic. He stopped, and she never said a word about any of it. Why? Conrad's voice was not what it usually was. The authority was still there, but underneath it was something stripped and raw. Why would she not say anything? After the car, why would she not come to me? I would have. I think, Rafe said carefully, that's exactly why she didn't. He sent Rafe to her address of record on Thursday morning. The apartment on Broadview was empty, cleaned down to the baseboards, every surface wiped. The building superintendent said she had paid out her lease in cash on Wednesday evening, no forwarding address. Her personal cell number rang out to a number that no longer existed. Conrad sat at his desk with the maintenance log spread in front of him and tried to understand how a woman could exist inside a building for over 2 years, keep it breathing, keep the man who ran it alive, and leave without a single loose thread. He thought about the photograph of the young man in the hospital bed, the thermos she brought from home, the fact that she ate alone in a mechanical room. He called Rafe. The man in the parking garage photo, Conrad said. What did we find on the phone she took from him? She photographed everything and then deleted the images remotely, we think. The phone itself was sent anonymously to Metro Toronto Police with a note flagging the registration and the man's employer. Conrad was quiet. She sent it to the police, he said. Yes. Not to me. No. He stood up. There's something I missed. Go back to the maintenance logs. Every vendor invoice she filed in the last 6 months. Find anything anomalous. It took Rafe's team 40 minutes. The anomaly was a purchase order from a commercial supply outfit called Lakeshore Industrial, filed under routine equipment upkeep. 2 padlocks, a battery backup unit, a portable propane heater. The delivery was not to the building. It was a pickup, cash collected by a woman, brown hair, barely said 3 words, paid exact change. The supply company was off Eastern Avenue, near the Portlands. The man behind the counter remembered her because she had asked about a unit storage availability near the lake. He pointed them to a facility on Commissioners Street. Conrad drove himself. He did not tell Rafe where he was going, which was a mistake, and he understood it was a mistake while he was making it, and he went anyway. The storage facility was a compound of metal-sided units in long, parallel rows, backed up against the industrial waterfront with its crane towers and container stacks. The January wind off the lake was brutal and indifferent. Conrad moved down the rows in the grey afternoon light, hands in his coat pockets, looking for signs of recent use. A fresh tire track in the muddy gravel, the absence of frost on a lock. He found it in the 3rd row from the east fence, a unit at the end of a dead-end lane, padlocked with something that was clearly new, bright silver against the rust, a faint electrical hum from within. He had his hand on the door when two vehicles rolled into the row behind him. They came without headlights. They came without announcement. 4 men out of the first car, 3 from the second, moving in the coordinated silence of people who had done this before. Conrad reached for his phone. Something hard connected with his wrist and the phone hit the gravel. A voice said his name, not with malice, with the flat efficiency of a task being completed. Conrad fought. He was not a passive man, but there was a professionalism to what was happening that personal determination could not overcome. They pushed him against the metal wall of the storage unit. The man holding his collar said that Group Messier sent their regards, and that the deal would be signing with different terms now, and that Conrad was going to come with them quietly. The floodlight at the end of the row exploded. The darkness that followed was total and abrupt, a hard switch from grey afternoon to nothing. The men around Conrad reacted with shouts and shifting weight, their grip loosening by a fraction, enough. From somewhere above and behind the storage unit, there was a sound of movement so controlled it almost wasn't a sound at all. A weight dropped between Conrad and the man holding him, not with a battle cry, not with announcement. Just suddenly there, in the space between. What happened in the next 90 seconds, Conrad would later be unable to reconstruct in sequence. He saw pieces of it in the flare of a dropped flashlight someone kicked across the gravel, a forearm across a throat, the methodical collapse of a large man against corrugated metal, a second operative swinging toward the movement and finding empty air before a strike caught him precisely at the knee joint. He heard very briefly a choked sound and then nothing from that direction. 2 men broke for the vehicles. The other did not. Then the compound was quiet. The wind came off the lake. Somewhere a chain-link fence rattled. Wren stepped into the beam of the fallen flashlight. She was wearing dark work clothes, canvas trousers, a heavy navy jacket, boots. Her hair was down, which Conrad had never seen, and there was a cut on her chin, new, bleeding lightly. She looked at the men on the ground with the same expression she had looked at Conrad's face when he fired her, measured. Accounting. She looked at him. "You found me through the supply order," she said. "Yes." A pause. She was reading him the way she read maintenance manuals, looking for the thing that needed attention. "You came alone." "I know." That was poorly considered. "I'm aware of that." She crouched beside the nearest man, checked his pulse, removed his phone, stood again. She did all of this without hurry. She moved to the second, then the third. She was thorough. "They work for Meridian Group," she said. "Same organization as the man in the service corridor. When their first attempt failed, they spent 2 days trying to identify who stopped it. They found a contractor record that linked back to a maintenance employee." She paused. "My fault. I used the same frequency twice." Conrad watched her work. He was cold through to the bone, and his wrist ached where the phone had been knocked from it. He felt none of the authority he carried on the 43rd floor. He felt for the first time in a long time like someone who had come very close to the edge of something without knowing the edge was there. "Wren." His voice came out differently than he intended. She looked at him. In the ambient glow of the city over the fence line, her eyes were dark and steady. She was quiet for long enough that he thought she would not answer. "Before this job," she said finally, "I was with the RCMP, Integrated National Security Enforcement Team. Counterintelligence, corporate and government intersect." She set a collected phone in her jacket pocket. "I left 4 years ago. An operation in Vancouver. Went wrong. The file was closed the wrong way and I was on the wrong side of it when it happened." "You lost your clearance." "I lost everything it is possible to officially lose. No self-pity in it. A fact reported accurately. Your father was in Vancouver on business when it happened. He wasn't supposed to intersect with anything I was involved in, but he did, and he saw something he shouldn't have, and instead of walking away from it, he made a phone call that kept me out of a federal detention facility." Conrad was very still. "He didn't ask anything in return," Wren continued. "He paid for a private legal file reassessment. He gave me a path to a clean record and a new professional identity. He told me to find something quiet to do with myself. You became a facility supervisor. Buildings are systems. Systems have vulnerabilities. I understand both." She met his eyes. "When your father died and Ashby Capital went into succession, I read the financial intelligence around it. I saw what was moving in behind the grief. Meridian Group, 2 other acquisition firms, parties who believed that a son inheriting his father's empire would be less defensible than the father who built it." She paused. "I thought they were wrong, but I didn't want to be wrong from the outside." The weight of 2 years and 3 months settled on Conrad like a physical thing. He thought of the 42 maintenance reports filed and lost, The 17 flags, unread. The car, the server room. The Mercia presentation, which she had saved the core of at the cost of the optics, because she had been one person and Meridian had sent two. "My brother," he said. He had seen the photograph, the man in the hospital. Something shifted in her face. Microscopic. He has a degenerative joint condition. He's been in treatment for 18 months. It's manageable with the right program. She said it the way she said everything, clean, no performance. But the fact of it was there underneath. She had needed the income, and she had needed the stability. And she had chosen this particular building for this particular reason and stayed because it became something she couldn't walk away from. "You packed a photograph of him," Conrad said. "That was the only personal item at your desk." "I don't keep things I can't afford to lose." Conrad looked at her, this woman who had fixed his car in the dark and filed reports that no one read and fought a trained operative with a zip tie and a maintenance toolkit, and then walked upstairs and absorbed determination without a single word of self-defense. He thought about what Rafe had said. "I think that's exactly why she didn't tell you. Because he would have turned her into a tool, and tools got pointed." He reached into his coat pocket. He removed the folded copy of her termination letter. He had taken it from the HR file that morning without fully understanding why. He held it out. Wren looked at the paper, then at him. "I'm not offering you your old job," Conrad said. "Your old job was a workaround. It was the only structure available to you for doing what you were actually doing." He paused. "Meridian Group will try again. The people who want what's inside this company will keep trying. I have 50 people who manage risk loudly. Filings and compliance teams and external counsel. What I don't have is anyone who understands that the real vulnerabilities are in the systems nobody looks at." Wren was watching him with that careful reading attention. "I want someone at the table," Conrad said. "Not adjacent to it. Not in a room on sub-level 2 eating lunch from a thermos. I mean the actual table, where the decisions that create the vulnerabilities get made. So someone who understands what they cost is in the room when they're being made." Wren was quiet. "My brother's treatment program," she said finally. "Full coverage. Company health plan, executive tier, retroactive to his admission date." She looked at the termination letter still extended in his hand. She reached out and took it. She folded it once, cleanly, along its existing crease, and slid it into her jacket pocket. "I'll need access to the full infrastructure audit," she said. "Server logs, contractor records, vendor relationships, everything. You'll have it by Monday. And I don't fix the coffee machine when it jams." Something unlocked in Conrad's chest that he hadn't known was locked. Understood. Wren Alcott looked at the city glow above the fence line. The wind came off the lake and moved the loose hair around her face, and she didn't push it back. She looked like someone who had carried a weight for a very long time, and was deciding, carefully, whether the ground in front of her was solid enough to set it down. "The Meridian file," she said. "I have 14 months of documentation they don't know exists." "Then we start there," Conrad said. She looked at him, not with warmth, not yet, but with something honest and unguarded that was more valuable than warmth. Recognition, maybe. The specific relief of being accurately seen. "Monday," she said. They walked out of the storage compound together into the January dark, and the city spread ahead of them, vast and indifferent, and full of systems that needed someone paying attention.